So hi, my name is Krishay and I'm a rising sophomore at Monte Vista High School. So I'm making a security camera using the Raspberry Pi 3 and OpenCV, and it uses Python to send an email whenever an object is detected. And make sure to only send an email once in a certain specified interval so that it's not annoying for the user. So I've reached the first milestone, and to get to this point I've switched from the Raspberry Pi 3 to switched from the Raspberry Pi 0 to a Raspberry Pi 3. So I've also installed other dependencies like OpenCV and some other stuff for getting this software working, and I've attached the hardware to this plastic casing, and it's also transparent so you can see the stuff inside. So here I can open a virtual environment by typing source./profile, and you can see that it worked. Or let me just type that in. Source profile. And then I can type work on CV to open a virtual environment. And now I can run Python in it. So Python, and you can see that I can type Python stuff. So import CV2, and that imports OpenCV. So now I can print the version of OpenCV, print CV2 dot version, and you can see that I'm running 3.1.0. It might be a bit hard to see through that camera, but just trust me. So now that was my project working, and throughout this project I've enjoyed several things, such as finding more about Raspberry Pi in general, since I use both the Raspberry Pi 0 and the Raspberry Pi 3. And I've also learned more about the Raspberry Pi Imager, which is the software that you can use to install the Raspberry Pi OS onto a micro SD card. But I've also struggled with some other things, such as installing the dependencies, because this camera requires a newer version of Raspberry Pi OS, and that version has Python 3, but OpenCV requires an older version of Python. The version that I'm using of OpenCV requires an older version of Python, so the two don't really match together, and that was pretty hard to figure out. But in the end, I did get it working. And then another problem that I had was using the Raspberry Pi 0 because it was very slow, so I switched to this stronger board. So the next steps are to write some code to get the actual camera working, and I also may add some black electrical tape around the edges of this to make it look better. And that's what I've done so far.